Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a close look at a really critical moment in South Korean history, the Gwangju Uprising, May 1980. It was a period of intense struggle, and, well, it had huge consequences. We've got quite a bit of material to go through to really understand it.
Yeah, we do. We're drawing on the Wikipedia entry mainly for the factual timeline, the sort of skeleton of events. But we're also digging into transcripts from some key YouTube documentaries. There's one on the Hanho military group.
Yes, Hanaho. We'll definitely need to talk about them.
Definitely. That's from Ostag Chuyir, Hear You. And then there's a two-parter, which really focuses on, how the truth eventually got out, the role of international awareness.
Right. So our mission today is pretty clear. First, understand what actually happened during the uprising. And that means looking at the authoritarian regime, the military structures, especially Hanaho, you mentioned them. And second, we really want to highlight how vital international awareness, that outside solidarity, was in uncovering what the regime tried to hide. Okay, so let's set the scene. What was the backdrop here? What led up to this explosion in Gwangju?
Well, the big trigger, you could say, was late 79 October. President Park Chung-hee, who ruled for ages, was assassinated. And that just threw everything up in the air. A huge power vacuum. Lots of uncertainty, politically, socially.
And into that vacuum steps Chun Doo-won. He was head of the Defense Security Command then.
That's right. He moved fast, seized military control with a coup on December 12th. Though interestingly, right after the coup, he sort of played it down. Said it was just about restoring order, no big political plans.
But that didn't last long, did it? Because by early 1980, we see these pro-democracy movements really bubbling up.
Yeah, absolutely. Spring 1980, the new school year starts. Students who have been kicked out, professors who have been fired under Park, they start coming back to the universities, they form student unions, and boom, they're leading nationwide demonstrations.
What were they asking for?
Pretty clear demands. And martial law, hold free elections, basic human rights, labor rights, freedom of the press, democracy. These protests got bigger and bigger, peaking with this huge demo at Seoul Station on May 15th. It really showed how widespread the desire for change was.
So the pressure is building. How did the government, or rather the military group now pulling the strings, respond? They didn't exactly embrace democracy, did they?
No, quite the opposite. They doubled down. On May 17th, Chun and the military basically strong-armed the cabinet into expanding martial law, nationwide this time.
And the justification was?
Oh, the usual. Need to stop social unrest, maintain stability. But what it really did was shut everything down. Universities closed, political activity banned, press censored even more tightly, and troops were sent into cities all over the country, including Gwangju.
Okay, Gwangju. It seems like this region, Jeolla, was always a bit of a thorn in the side of the central government. Why was that?
Yeah, the Jeolla region, especially Gwangju, it has this long history of, dissent, strong pro-democracy feeling. It was also the home region of Kim Dae-jung, a really popular opposition leader. He had massive support there.
Right, there were economic reasons too, right? Under Park Chung-hee's rule.
Definitely. Jeolla province felt neglected, exploited economically. So you had these deep-seated grievances, political and economic, combined with this strong regional identity and history of resistance. It was kind of a powder keg.
So you've got this tense atmosphere, expanded martial law, clamps down, troops arrive. How did the uprising actually start? What was the spark on May 18th?
It kicked off on the morning of the 18th. Students gathered at Cheonan National University. They were protesting because the university had just been shut down under the new martial law. It wasn't a huge group initially, maybe 200 students, but they were met by paratroopers.
Paratroopers, right away. Not regular police.
Well, police were involved initially, but the paratroopers, the special worker command units, they came in pretty quickly, and they were aggressive, pushed the students off campus into the downtown area towards the provincial office building.
And things turned violent very fast.
Extremely fast and extremely brutal. By the afternoon, the paratroopers seemed to take over from the local police. And their tactics were, shocking. They were using clubs, bayonets, not just on protesters, but anyone nearby, bystanders. There were even reports of them raiding buildings, attacking people inside.
Just indiscriminately.
Yeah. The first person known to have been killed was a deaf man, Kim Gi-dong, just walking by, clubbed to death.
Oh my God.
That kind of brutality, it didn't quell the protests, it did the opposite. It horrified people, angered them. It drew more people out.
So the violence actually fueled the resistance.
Absolutely. It backfired spectacularly on the military. By May 20th, just 2 days later, you had over 10,000 people protesting. And that day, the army fired directly into the crowd near Gwangju Station. We don't know exactly how many died there, but it was another major escalation. Lethal force.
And wasn't there an incident involving the media, the local TV station?
Yes, that was also on the 20th. People were furious about the news coverage. The state-controlled media, like NBC, was basically calling up protesters communist rioters.
Yeah.
Spreading total disinformation. So a large group attacked the NBC building and burned it down. It was an act of desperation, really, against the lies being told.
It wasn't just students anymore at this point, was it? I read about the drivers of democracy.
That's right. A really powerful moment on the night of the 20th. Hundreds of taxi drivers, bus drivers, truck drivers, they joined in. Used their vehicles to block the army, helped transport injured people. A real show of solidarity from working citizens.
How did the soldiers react to that?
More violence, tear gas, attacks on the drivers. It just showed the regime was determined to crush any resistance, no matter where it came from. But it also showed the uprising was growing way beyond just students.
Then May 21st. That seems like a particularly dark day.
It was devastating. Around midday, the army opened fire on this huge crowd. Unarmed civilians gathered right in front of the South Jeolla provincial office. Just mass casualties, killed, wounded. It was horrific.
And that's when citizens started arming themselves.
Yes. After that massacre, some people felt they had no choice. They raided police stations, reserve armories, and nearby towns looking for weapons. Interestingly, they even put up signs saying, basically, North Korea, don't misunderstand, this is our fight for democracy. They wanted to make it clear this wasn't some communist plot.
So it shifted from protest to armed resistance.
It did. That afternoon, May 21st, you started seeing actual armed clashes. Civilian militias against the army in the provincial office square. By the evening, the militias had gotten hold of some light machine guns, apparently, and managed to push the army back.
Push them back, the regular army.
Yeah. By the end of the day, the army actually retreated from the downtown area, left the city center for a time in the hands of the citizens. It was a pretty stunning moment.
Wow. So the citizens are in control of the city center. What happens next? The army just leaves.
Not leaves entirely. They pull back to the outskirts by May 22nd, regrouping, waiting for reinforcements. And they set up a total blockade. Gwangju was completely sealed off, roads blocked, phone lines cut. It was isolated. A massive military force surrounded the city, airborne brigades, infantry, mechanized units.
And this blockade wasn't just passive containment, right?
Yeah.
There was more violence.
No, it was brutal. There are documented cases of soldiers attacking civilians trying to flee the city. One horrific incident in Gwangju on the 23rd. Soldiers fired on a bus full of civilians, killed most of them, reportedly executed wounded survivors.
That's sickening.
And on the 24th, 2 teenage boys trying to swim across a reservoir to escape. Shot dead by paratroopers. It shows just how ruthless the military cordon was.
And there's even fighting amongst the soldiers themselves, a friendly fire incident.
Yes. Also on May 24th, in Sungam-dong, major confusion, miscommunication, one army unit fired on another, 13 soldiers died, and in the chaos right after, troops from one of those units apparently went on a rampage, killed unarmed civilians in a nearby village, looted shops.
And the military command thought this was insurgents.
Initially, yes. Because communication was so bad, they apparently thought insurgents had infiltrated the army ranks and caused the friendly fire. It just highlights the utter chaos and breakdown of command.
Amidst all this horror, it's kind of amazing that the citizens inside Gwangju managed to organize.
It really is. With the army out of the downtown area, 2 main groups popped up to try and manage things. The Citizen Settlement Committee respected locals, preachers, lawyers, professors, and the Student Settlement Committee, made up of university students.
What were they trying to achieve, the citizens' committee?
They focused on negotiating with the military. Their demands were release everyone arrested, compensate the victims, guarantee no reprisals later, and in return, they offered disarmament of the civilian militias.
And the students, what was their role?
The Students' Committee handled the practicalities of running the city in this vacuum, organizing funerals, trying to get information out, directing traffic, collecting the weapons from the militias, which must have been incredibly difficult, and coordinating medical aid for the wounded. There were some key leaders involved, trying to keep things together.
It sounds like a desperate attempt to restore order and find a way out without more bloodshed. Did the negotiations work?
They kept order in the city remarkably well, by all accounts, but the talks with the army stalled. The military absolutely insisted on immediate, unconditional surrender of all weapons. And this caused a split within the settlement committees. Some felt resistance was hopeless, they should surrender to save lives. Others argued they had to hold out for their demands.
And the hardliners won out.
Ultimately, yes. Those who favored continued resistance gained the upper hand, and the negotiations broke down.
Did the events in Gwangju inspire protests elsewhere? Did word get out?
Some word did filter out, yes. Protests popped up in nearby towns in the province, Hwasun, Naju, Hainam, Mokpo, and others. Mostly peaceful, though there were reports of gunfights in Hainam. But with Gwangju itself isolated and the military presence so overwhelming, most of these other protests died down by May 24th. Mokpo held out a bit longer, until the 28th.
But back in Gwangju, that period of citizen control couldn't last. The military was regrouping.
Right. By May 26th, it was clear the army was prepping for a full assault to retake the city. Some members of the Citizens Committee actually tried to physically block the army's path, forming human chains on the roads. A desperate, brave act. But it didn't work.
And the militias knew it was coming.
They did. When news of the imminent attack spread, the remaining armed citizens gathered at the provincial office. It had become the symbol of their resistance. They prepared for a last stand.
And the final assault came when? How did it happen?
It began at 4 a.m. sharp, May 27th. Operation Sengmuchengjon, Martialism and Loyalty, that was the code name. Elite airborne troops led the charge. Heavily armed M16s, stun grenades. Some were apparently disguised to blend in, cause confusion. They had massive backup from mechanized units, infantry divisions, overwhelming force.
How long did the resistance last?
Not long. The silver militias were poorly armed, outnumbered. The army retook the city center, including the provincial office, within about 90 minutes. It was swift, decisive, and brutal.
What about the local police during all this? Where were they?
It's a bit murky. They were involved at the very beginning, handling the initial student protests. But as the military, especially the paratroopers, took over, the police were pushed aside. Eventually, the martial law command just ordered them to evacuate the city. There were even reports of bad blood, paratroopers assaulting police officers, suggest real tension and lack of coordination.
And didn't the provincial police chief try to resist the orders?
Yes, a truly courageous story. An Byung-ha, the Commissioner General of the Jeonnam Provincial Police, he got a direct order from Chun Do-won. Tell your men to fire on the civilians. And he refused. Flat out refused an unlawful order.
What happened to him?
He paid a terrible price, sacked immediately, arrested by military intelligence, tortured horribly. The injuries he suffered during that torture, they eventually killed him about 8 years later. A real profile in courage, but with tragic consequences.
The human cost overall must have been immense. What are the figures on casualties? It seems hard to pin down.
It is incredibly hard. There's no single number everyone agrees on. Civilian death estimates range massively from maybe 600 up to, some say, 2,300, plus thousands injured. The government's initial figures right after were way lower, like 144 civilians, 22 soldiers, 4 police. But nobody believed those numbers. Challenging them was risky. You could get arrested.
What do the victim support groups say, like the May 18 Family Association?
They've done extensive work trying to document everyone. Their figures are at least 165 civilians confirmed killed between May 18th and 27th, plus another 76 still missing, presumed dead. They also count the 22 soldiers and 4 policemen. Though, as we said, there's suspicion the police death toll might be higher because of soldiers maybe killing officers who'd released protesters.
And remember, 13 of those soldier deaths were from that friendly fire incident.
Exactly. It just adds to the tragedy and chaos of it all.
So, after the city is retaken, the military is back in control. How did the Chun government spin this? What was the official story?
They immediately went on the offensive, portraying the whole thing as a rebellion, incited by Kim Dae-jung and his followers. They threw around accusations of communist sympathizers, North Korean involvement, classic authoritarian playbook stuff. Zero credible evidence, of course.
And Kim Dae-jung himself was targeted.
Oh, absolutely. He was arrested, charged with sedition, initially sentenced to death. International pressure got that reduced to life imprisonment later. But the message was clear. Blame the victims, blame the opposition.
And the people who actually participated in the uprising, what happened to them?
Mass arrests. Over 1,300 people rounded up. More than 400 indicted. 7 got death sentences, 12 got life. And remember, independent estimates say maybe 200,000 ordinary people took part in the uprising at some point, facing a much smaller number of heavily armed troops. So the punishments were severe and aimed at crushing dissent.
But they couldn't just erase it, could they? The memory, the impact?
No way. Despite the government's best efforts to suppress the truth, Gwangju became this incredibly powerful symbol. A symbol of the fight for democracy, for human rights. It really fueled the democracy movement throughout the 1980s. That constant pressure eventually forced the regime to give way, leading to the first real democratic elections in 1987.
And ironically, Kim Dae-jung, the man they blamed.
Exactly. He eventually became president in 1997, South Korea's first president elected from the opposition. It shows the incredible long-term power of the Gwangju spirit.
It took a long time, but there was an official reevaluation too, wasn't there? How did that come about?
Yeah, years of relentless pressure from victims' families, activists, the whole democracy movement. Finally, in 1995, the government passed the special law on the May 18 democratization movement. That law was huge. It officially recognized Gwangju as part of the struggle for democracy, and crucially, it allowed prosecutors to go after those responsible for the coup and the crackdown, even overriding the statute of limitations. It paved the way for accountability.
And people were actually convicted, high-level people.
Yes, Chun Doo-won himself and Ro Tai-woo, his successor and fellow Hanaho member. They were arrested, tried in 95-96, charged with insurrection, ordering the killings. Chun initially got the death penalty, later commuted to life plus a massive fine. Ro got a long prison sentence too.
But they were pardoned later.
They were, yes, pardoned eventually in the name of national reconciliation. But the convictions themselves were incredibly significant, an official acknowledgement of the state's crimes in Gwangju.
How else has South Korea tried to remember and honor what happened?
Several important things. The May 18 Memorial Foundation was set up in 2000. They give out the Gwangju Prize for Human Rights every year. The victims, initially buried in makeshift graves, were reinterred with full honors at a national cemetery in Gwangju. It's a memorial site now.
And May 18th itself is a national day?
Yes, a National Memorial Day, so it's officially commemorated every year. And in 2011, UNESCO recognized the Gwangju Documents records, testimonies, as part of the Memory of the World Register, global significance. Plus, there are ongoing efforts. New investigations started in 2017, a Truth Commission in 2020. And they even revised the May 18 Special Act to penalize spreading false information about the uprising, protecting the historical record.
Let's touch on those initial government claims about North Korean involvement again. Was there anything to that at all?
Look, the Chun dictatorship and even some later conservative governments pushed that narrative hard. It was a convenient way to discredit the protesters. But all the evidence, especially declassified U.S. intelligence reports, completely refutes it. No significant North Korean involvement.
So the U.S. intelligence was clear on that?
Very clear. They concluded it was an indigenous uprising, driven by internal anger and demands for democracy. Now, was North Korea watching? Probably. Might they have considered intervening if it became a nationwide collapse? Maybe. But they didn't instigate or control Gwangju.
Which brings us to the U.S. role. That seems complicated and led to a lot of anger in South Korea, right?
Yeah, anti-American sentiment definitely spiked in the 80s because of Gwangju. There was this strong perception that the U.S. backed Chun and therefore was complicit in the crackdown. The U.S. ambassador at the time did admit they okayed the deployment of one specific ROK Army division, which was technically under joint U.S. ROK command to Gwangju.
Okayed its deployment, but did they know how it would be used?
The U.S. government has always denied having advanced knowledge of the timing or the sheer brutality of the crackdown. Their line is they expressed concern but couldn't directly interfere in internal affairs.
But for many South Koreans, that wasn't enough. They felt the U.S. could have done more.
Exactly. That perception lingered for a long time, that the U.S. prioritized stability under Chun over democratic rights.
Despite the official U.S. position, though, it seems clear that other international actors, individuals, journalists, activists played a massive role in getting the truth out.
Oh, absolutely crucial. The Chun regime tried everything to impose a media blackout, domestically and internationally. But brave people risked everything. We have to mention Jürgen Hinzpeter, the German reporter. His footage, smuggled out, shown around the world, it was undeniable proof of the violence. His story was even made into that movie, A Taxi Driver.
He wasn't alone, though, was he? The documentary transcripts mention others.
Right. Paul Schneiss, a German missionary. He was vital. He fed information, contacts to Professor Chung Kwon, who used the pseudonym T.K. Sang for the Japanese magazine Sekai. Those Sekai articles were some of the first detailed, accurate accounts to reach an international audience. Schneiss also actively alerted human rights groups, making sure the world knew.
And the American Peace Corps volunteers who were there.
Yes, people like David Dollinger, Paul Corey White. They were right there in Gwangju, saw the crackdown firsthand, even saw helicopters firing on civilians. And despite the danger, they managed to get their eyewitness accounts out through informal channels. Incredibly brave, and their testimony was so important in countering the government's lies.
It really sounds like this network, almost underground, of people working together across borders.
It was exactly that. Journalists, missionaries, volunteers, activists in Japan, ordinary citizens inside Korea helping them, all taking huge risks, driven by, a commitment to truth. Think about that free Gwangju video made in Japan in '81, using those powerful woodblock prints by Tomiyama Taiko. Art as resistance, raising awareness.
What about Koreans living abroad, the diaspora communities? Were they involved?
Hugely involved. All around the world, Korean diaspora communities mobilized. In the U.S., people like Seo Yujin organized protests, fed information to media, human rights groups. He wasn't even from Gwangju, but dedicated his life to the cause. And Yoon Il-bong, a survivor who escaped to the U.S., he spent his life raising awareness, organizing marches, supporting victims back home, carried that survivor's guilt, but channeled it into action.
And elsewhere, Europe, Japan.
Same story. Korean communities in Germany held protests, sent aid, and having German media like Hinzpeter reporting early was key there. In Japan, Korean residents, Minden-affiliated groups, youth leagues like Hanmintong, they organized, published information, lobbied the Japanese government. It was a global effort.
Okay, let's pivot back to the military side for a moment. This group, Hanaho, you mentioned it earlier, we need to understand who they were.
Right. Hanaho translates roughly as One Heart Society. It was this very secretive, very powerful private club within the South Korean army. Started back in 1964 by Chun Do-won himself, actually, with President Park Chung-hee's blessing, it seems.
And who was in it?
Mostly graduates from the 11th class of the Korea Military Academy.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, a significant number, came from the Yeongnam region, the Gyeongsang provinces in the southeast. That regional connection was important.
What was their goal, their ideology, if they had one?
Their sort of unofficial motto was one heart for the son, meaning Park Chung-hee and the fatherland. So loyalty to Park was key, but really it was about power, consolidating their own influence in the military, protecting Park, making sure their members got promoted, got the key jobs. It was a patronage network, essentially.
Were they the only group like this, or were there rivals?
There were other cliques, yeah, like Chungjako, the Blue Bamboo Society. They tended to be more the top academic graduates, maybe more policy-focused. Hanaho was maybe more focused on field commands, guys with strong regional ties. And ultimately, Hanaho just had more members, better connections through Chun to Park. They became dominant.
How did they get so powerful? How did they manage to exert so much control?
Very strategically. They made sure Hanaho members rotated through all the critical military posts. Capital Security Command, defending Seoul. The Security Command, which Chun himself headed. Special forces like the paratroopers sent to Gwangju. Even the Presidential Security Service. By having their guys in all these key spots, they built this incredible network of influence. A state within a state, almost.
And the promise of these top jobs kept people loyal, I imagine.
Absolutely. It created a strong bond, mutual obligation. You help us, we help you get promoted. It wasn't just ideology, it was career advancement. That's powerful glue.
Did anyone try to stop them? Surely someone noticed this shadow group taking over.
There was a key moment, yeah. The Yan Pil-young incident in 1973. The sources mention this from General Kang Chang-song, head of Army Security Command, and he found out about Hanaho. Identified Chun as the ringleader. Kang was worried about this private group undermining the official command structure, so he tried to investigate, maybe dismantle it.
Who was Yan Pil-young in all this? Was he the actual leader?
Not exactly the leader, but maybe the godfather. He was Army Chief of Staff, a powerful figure who supported Hanaho, facilitated things for them. Chun was the operational guy, but Yan provided top cover. He knew how they worked, this cell structure where most members only knew a few others.
So Kang tries to expose them, but it backfired.
Massively backfired. It seems Park Chung-hee found out the full extent of Hanaho through Kang's investigation. But instead of seeing them as a threat, Park saw them as useful. A way to keep tabs on the rest of the military, ensure loyalty to him.
So Park protected them.
Essentially, yes. Kang pushed to get rid of Chun, but he misread Park's intentions. Kang himself ended up getting dismissed. Yan Pil-young and some associates were sidelined too, but weirdly, this just ended up cementing Chun's leadership within Hanaho even more. The whole thing was hushed up, blamed on some vague corruption case. Hanaho wasn't mentioned publicly.
Okay, fast forward again. Park is assassinated in October 79. How does it change things for Hanaho?
It's their moment. Huge power vacuum. The acting president, Choi Kyu-ha, had no real control over the military, so Chun and his Hanaho loyalists saw their chance. December 12, 1979, they launched the coup. Arrested rival generals, put their own people in all the key command posts. This is when the new military, the Shingun, really takes over, with Hanaho right at its heart.
And Chun's rise after that was incredibly fast, almost like Park's own coup decades before.
The parallels are definitely there. After the coup, Chun promoted himself and his buddies rapidly. Within 9 months, he's a 4-star general. Then uses the student protests as the excuse to expand martial law nationwide in May 1980, which, of course, directly leads to the Gwangju crackdown just days later. You absolutely cannot separate Chun and Han Ho's power grab from the tragedy in Gwangju.
So Han Ho's rise is directly linked to the conditions and the brutal response in Gwangju. But as we said, despite the regime's best efforts, the truth did get out.
It really did. And it's largely thanks to these international connections. We mentioned Hinzpeter's filming. But Paul Schneiss, again, his role was so critical. Getting that information to TK Sang for Seikai magazine, that reached a huge audience, provided that crucial counter-narrative.
And Schneiss wasn't just passing information, he was actively making sure the regime knew they were being watched.
Exactly. He made sure international human rights groups knew what was happening. That put pressure on the regime, made them realize their actions weren't totally secret. Maybe it even prevented worse atrocities, who knows?
And the Peace Corps volunteers, again, their first-hand accounts, must have carried a lot of weight internationally.
Immense weight. David Dolinger, Paul Corey-White, being American, being there, witnessing things like helicopters firing on civilians.
Right.
Their testimony was powerful. It directly contradicted the official story and helped galvanize international opinion, risking so much to do it.
It's just a testament to that collaborative spirit you mentioned. People from everywhere risking safety for the truth.
Absolutely. Foreign journalists, missionaries, volunteers, and don't forget the local Koreans who helped them, translators, people providing shelter, passing messages. They faced the biggest risks of all. The documentaries really bring home the bravery, the shared danger, the lasting bonds formed.
And that free Gwangju video from Japan using art to tell the story.
Such a powerful example. Tomiyama Taiko's woodblock prints. That image of the mother holding her dead child. It hits you right in the gut, doesn't need translation. It helped keep Gwangju in the public eye internationally, kept the pressure on.
Meanwhile, back in Korea, Chun solidifies power. He even picks his successor from Hanaho ranks.
Yep. Chun becomes president, rules through the 80s, picks Roh Tae-woo, another Hanaho Corps member, to follow him. Roh wins the 87 election after huge democracy protests forced the issue, becomes president in 88. So Hanaho stays at the top.
But its power started to fade under Roh, didn't it? Why was that?
That's right. It seems Chun tried to keep pulling the strings even after leaving office. Caused friction with Roh. Internal conflict between the two old Hanaho allies. That fighting within the clique weakened Hanaho's unity, its influence. Roh's presidency is often seen as the start of the decline for that whole Yeongnam military faction dominance.
So when did Hanaho officially end? Who finally dismantled it?
The final nail in the coffin came with President Kim Young-sam in 1993. He was a civilian leader, determined to assert civilian control of the military, stop any future coups. He launched this big cleanup operation targeting private cliques in the army. Hanaho, being the biggest and most notorious, was target number 1. Kim ordered it dissolved, blocked its members from further promotion of key posts.
Was there pushback from the military?
Reportedly, yes. Some grumbling, some officers reminding him about past military regimes' potential instability. But Kim Young-sam stood firm. He had strong public backing. He famously said something like, "Even if dogs bark, the train goes," meaning, I'm doing this to get out of the way. And that was basically the end of Hanaho's direct influence.
Reflecting on those documentaries again, it really is humbling to think about the risks people took, Koreans, foreigners, just to get the truth out about Gwangju.
It is. Deeply humbling. They weren't doing it for fame or money. It was about truth, justice, human rights, putting themselves in real danger so the world would know, so the victims wouldn't be forgotten. Their courage, their dedication, it's truly inspiring, even decades later.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, we've seen Hanaho, the secretive military clique, rise to immense power, directly contributing to the horror in Gwangju. But we've also seen this incredible, vital response from the international community. Ordinary people, journalists, activists, risking so much to expose the truth, to stand with Gwangju.
It's such a powerful story about how interconnected these struggles are. Democracy, human rights, and how crucial a free flow of information, that international solidarity, is when you're up against authoritarianism.
All right.
Accountability.
And that really leaves you, the listener, with something to think about, doesn't it? This history, the danger of unchecked military power, the tragedy of Gwangju, but also the courage of the response. How does it shape how we see the balance between military and civilian control today? How vital is a free press? And maybe most importantly, what does it tell us about the power and necessity of international solidarity when people face oppression? Not just in South Korea back then, but in struggles for democracy and human rights that are still happening all over the world right now. It's a history with lessons that, well, they still feel incredibly relevant.